The crowd outside the Super Safe supermarket stood frozen like mannequins. She was Naledi Williams, billionaire tech genius, Africa's software queen. But today, Naledi wasn't here for an interview or a speech. She was walking straight toward a homeless man, his shoulder like it was carrying his entire life. "My name is Naledi," she said softly. "Thabo Uche." And then, just as everyone's jaws dropped, she added, "You talk about data and business like someone who's lived in that world." Thabo's mouth parted in disbelief. "If you really mean that," he said slowly, "bring a ring, come back, kneel down, and ask me like you mean it." Gasps erupted from the crowd, but Naledi didn't flinch. She turned, walked calmly into the supermarket, and just 5 minutes later, in her hand was a diamond ring worth more than most people's houses. She said, "Now get in the car." He hesitated, looking at his muddy trousers, his smell, his crusted skin. Slowly, like someone rising from the dead, Thabo stood. The chauffeur opened the door and he stepped into the Bentley, leaving behind the only life he had known for years. But Thabo had no idea. The Bentley hummed quietly as Naledi pulled into the heart of Victoria Island, the city sparkling like a sea of diamonds under the Lagos sun. Thabo sat stiffly, his bag clutched tightly on his lap, his eyes darting between Naledi and the road ahead. Everything felt like a dream. He didn't even know how Naledi stole a quick glance at him. At the next stop, she said gently, "Come with me." Thabo only nodded. A man in a crisp white shirt opened the door with a bow, but paused when he saw Thabo. Naledi stepped out, turned to Thabo, and smiled. For the next hour, Thabo sat motionless as barbers clipped, washed, trimmed, styled, and brushed until he looked like someone entirely new. By the time they handed him a mirror, he didn't recognize the man staring back. He touched his face slowly, blinking in disbelief. "Clothes," one of the stylists said, holding a tailored white outfit. Thabo hesitated. When he stepped out, Naledi stood up. In the place of the scruffy homeless man was someone else entirely, someone she hadn't even imagined. The transformation was almost cinematic, like something pulled out of a dream. "You are the man I saw," Naledi said. Thabo said nothing for a moment. When they reached the gate, his eyes widened. He stepped out slowly, like a child walking into a fairy tale. "What is that?" Naledi opened her arms. "This is my home," she said, crouching beside Sipho. Thabo smiled softly. Sipho chuckled for the first time in years. That night, Naledi gave him a guest room, though it looked more like a suite. He hadn't eaten real food like this in years. Naledi joined him with 2 glasses of wine. "Thabo?" she asked. He looked down at his hands for a long time before answering. "My name is Thabo Uche." Naledi's eyes welled up. "I walked out of my life and never went back," he said. Tears ran down Naledi's face. "I know that pain," she said, her voice breaking. "For years, I waited, cried, prayed, but nothing. I had to live for Sipho and for me." Thabo looked at her stunned. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he wasn't just alive. He was living. That night, as he lay in the soft bed, Thabo stared at the ceiling with wide eyes. Because for the first time in years, he was dreaming again. Thabo woke up, not to the smell of gutter water or the sound of speeding Okadas under the bridge, but to birds singing. He touched his freshly trimmed beard, ran his fingers through his now clean hair, and smiled faintly. "Come in," he said. "Good morning, mister. Thabo, mommy said to tell you breakfast is ready." "Good morning, Sipho," he replied, smiling, "and you can call me Uncle Thabo." Thabo took a deep breath, got dressed, and headed down. Naledi was already seated at the dining table, dressed in a sleek gown. "Good morning," she said warmly. "I hope you're hungry." Thabo blinked, gave her a curious look. Naledi leaned back in her chair. "No," she said slowly. "I mean, hungry for life." Thabo coughed, embarrassed. "It's hard to believe someone like you, Naledi, could sit with someone like me." He looked down at his plate, hands trembling. He didn't speak again. That afternoon, Thabo followed Naledi into the glass tower that housed MTech headquarters, one of the most advanced in Lagos. As Naledi entered, staff members greeted her with respect. Heads turned when they noticed Thabo walking beside her. They entered the executive floor, and Naledi opened the door to a spacious office. "This will be yours," she said. "You'll be working directly under me." Thabo stepped in slowly, scanning the room. It felt like he had stepped back into a part of his soul that had been locked away for years. From that moment, Thabo began to rediscover himself. Naledi would watch him from her office with quiet pride. "The board is impressed," she told him. One day, Thabo looked up, stunned. Naledi smiled, folding her arms. Thabo wasn't just changing. For Naledi, something changed too. She laughed more, smiled deeper, worked less after hours, and spent more evenings on the balcony with Sipho and Thabo, talking about life and dreams. One night, as rain pattered gently outside and Lagos traffic glowed in the distance, Naledi looked at Thabo. "Why did you say yes that day?" Thabo chuckled softly. Naledi tilted her head, her eyes shining. At a late dinner on the mansion's rooftop balcony, Thabo stood up and cleared his throat. Gasps escaped from Sipho and the two staff standing at the door. Thabo held up a shining platinum ring. "You gave me my life back. A reason to smile, to be a father again, to love again. Naledi Williams, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, smiling through her tears. Sipho, now 6 years old, clapped her hands excitedly. Thabo slipped the ring on. Naledi's finger and the entire household erupted with joy. 2 months later, Naledi and Thabo had the most extravagant wedding Lagos had seen in years. The media called it a love story written by grace. But for Naledi, this was just the beginning, because her life was about to take another beautiful turn. 3 years had passed since Naledi knelt on the dusty roadside outside SuperSafe supermarket and asked a homeless man to marry her. But to Naledi and Thabo, the attention didn't matter. Thabo was now co-CEO of MTech. Alongside Naledi's visionary guidance, the company had expanded across West Africa, introducing a new line of AI technology. Sipho had grown into a bright, joyful 7-year-old. Naledi stood in the kitchen, humming softly as she stirred a pot of okra soup. Thabo walked in and froze for a moment, simply watching her. "What is it?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing," he replied, walking over to her. "You just look like a dream I never thought I'd have again." She leaned into him, and he kissed her gently. Months later, Naledi gave birth to a baby boy. When she held the baby in her arms, something inside her healed. She looked at Thabo and whispered, "This is the family I always prayed for." Thabo held both Naledi and the baby close, whispering, "And this is the family I thought I'd never deserve again." Sipho, now big sister, took her job seriously. Years passed, and she graduated from the University of Nigeria as a medical doctor. Naledi and Thabo attended her graduation proudly. There she met Oina, a kind young man who would later ask formally for Sipho's hand in marriage. 3 years later, during her 21st birthday, he proposed in front of close friends and family. She said yes, her voice shaking with excitement. Once again, Naledi cried, this time tears of joy. At the wedding, Sipho whispered to them, "Thank you for everything." Thabo smiled. "Make us proud." And she did. 9 months after Sipho and Oina's wedding, the family gathered at Naledi's mansion for a small celebration. Sipho gave birth to baby Amarachi, and when Thabo held his granddaughter for the first time, he whispered in her ear, "You don't know it yet, but you saved me." That evening, the family sat on the balcony, watching the sunset over Lagos. Sipho, Oina, baby Amarachi, Naledi, Thabo, and little Williams, their son. Naledi whispered, "I can't believe this is my life." Thabo smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "Everything starts with belief," he said. Years later, Naledi and Thabo launched the Uche Foundation, training and employing the homeless, widows, and orphans with skills in tech and design. "It tells them they can still rise," Naledi said at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. That night, on the rooftop of the new building, Thabo turned to her. "Naledi, do you regret any of it?" She shook her head, tears glistening. Not a single moment. They stood in silence, looking at the Lagos skyline. Naledi whispered, "You know what I saw that day? I saw a broken king, and I knew I was looking at the man I was meant to love." Thabo smiled, holding her hand. Together, they watched the city lights, knowing their story would live forever.